welcome everyone on the call to the webinar. A couple of other quick notes. We're really here to answer your questions. I'm going to give you the behind-the-scenes look at the survey, but I encourage you, there's a chat functionality. Casey is going to be monitoring it on our behalf. I will answer questions as best I can as they come up. If we don't have a good answer for your question, or if we run out of time, we will have an archive. We are recording this. We will get back to you as long as we know who asked the question and answer that for you. So here's what we've got planned. I'm going to try to blast through in about, oh gosh, I've got 6 minutes left on the first 10 minutes. Just a quick little bit about NCHL and a little bit about the BOLD program itself. I want to spend the bulk of our time together talking about the various domains of the BOLD survey itself. I understand from Casey that folks on the call, many of you had participated in 16. You have a scorecard. You might have specific questions coming out of that. Happy to answer those as best I can. We'll spend a little bit of time at the back end on emerging topics. Casey, I think had mentioned this is a survey that we revise every other year as a part of the recognition process. So emerging topics are things that have come to our attention. They look important, but the evidence base isn't there quite yet to support having a dimension around them or having them as a part of the protocol. As best I can, I will leave some time also then at the back end for additional questions that you may have, anything that might be on your mind. So with that, Casey, if you could forward up. So, all right, here's my quick commercial about NCHL. National Center for Healthcare Leadership is a nonprofit organization. It was started in about 2001. Gail Warden, who was running the Henry Ford Health System at the time, got it started. And the best I can encapsulate it was he saw an opportunity for health systems to do a lot more in the area of adopting leadership development as a core organizational competency. It was an area at the time when the other industries were far ahead of healthcare. And so,
whoops. Sorry. We have a note that they might not be seeing anything on the screen, so I'm going to work on that for you.
Oh, our apologies. Casey is working on this. All you're seeing, and you will receive a copy of these after the webinar, is a list of NCHL programs. Essentially, NCHL gets most of its support from organizational members. We have roughly 160 health systems that are members of one or more of our councils or the Leadership Excellence Network. We also have another 35 graduate programs in healthcare management that participate in one of our councils, the National Council on Administrative Fellowships. So very much a member-operated organization. We do partner a little bit with vendor community to provide sponsorship for some of our activities, but we manage those relationships very carefully. And actually, there's an organization, Cielo Healthcare, that's provided us a lot of help and support around the BOLD program. Are folks able to see us now?
Sounds like it.
Terrific. We got a visual. If there's anything on this slide that you're interested in hearing more about, Casey, I'd be very happy to have a conversation with you about it. A lot of interesting and a lot of fun stuff that she oversees on our behalf. In fact, I think at least one of the folks on the call, Sarah Arnett, one of my favorite people from Cone Health, is also a participant. So welcome, Sarah. All right, so here's my quick blast through the background. Go ahead and skip this one up here there we go. So here's a favorite quote of mine. It's from Michael Lombardo, this idea, if you're short on bench strength today, it's because your predecessors were asleep at the wheel 10 to 15 years ago. This is just to say that it takes a long time to prepare leaders for roles, especially at the top of the pipe there, organizational leadership. There's really quite a lengthy process to get people ready for these types of roles. So if anyone's interested in this type of structure, I have a publication I'm happy to send you, just ping me. But this is just sort of a generic map of the roadway, regardless of organization, regardless of specific setting. Back in 2011, we did some research to take a look at what we knew, state of the science around leadership, And I won't go through these in a lot of depth, but it's just to say if you're interested in this topic, that white paper that you see is available on the NCHL website. You can download it at no cost. You don't even have to give us your name. We're just trying to get this stuff out to the field to be helpful around supporting leadership development. So, a couple of the things here, how versus how much. I do want to point out the best organizations for leadership development. That title is intentional. It's best organizations for leadership development, not necessarily best organizations at leadership development. And what I mean by that is an organization that's doing a lot of work, that's providing a lot of opportunity for its employees to develop as leaders. There's some real advantage in terms of the BOLD survey around that. And part of the intent of the survey is to give organizations the credit they deserve around some of these types of activities. So what we've been learning, and Casey is an industrial psychologist. She comes to us with this wonderful background from the Illinois Institute of Technology. There is a lot of research that's being generated around leadership and leadership development. A lot of this just really never makes it to the field of practice, or it takes a very long time to get in. This is a slide of a couple of interesting research initiatives by Herman McGinnis out of University of Indiana. And it's looking at some of these capacity builders in terms of their impact on performance. My apologies if these kinds of diagrams put anyone to sleep. The only point I want to make out of this is we saw some importance and some value not only in monitoring what's going on in this research, but finding some ways that we could get this evidence out to the field more rapidly. So NCHL's had a long history of doing surveys around leadership development. We really kicked this up a notch starting in about 2013, 2014 by creating this conduit between the evidence base as it's evolving and the survey itself. And so in 2016, and this is the most recent survey iteration, you can see there an advisory council that helped us out with this. So just want to give quick props to that group in terms of helping us shape not only what the evidence looked like, but how do we translate this into something that's meaningful for the field of practice. So many thanks again to everyone on that list. The other organization I want to give some props to here is Cielo Healthcare. Cielo Healthcare is a recruitment process outsourcing organization. They provided some generous sponsorship to us for the survey. I do want to point out RPO does not find itself on the survey. Cielo wasn't looking to help us push RPO as a business solution. They were very, very much aligned in terms of what does the evidence have to say around this. So again, grateful for their support. So a bit of background. I have two other quick background things to say. The first one, you can see here the description of the BOLD Award Program. The BOLD Award Program is partly, as I mentioned a minute ago, about giving folks recognition for the good work that they're doing in this area, but partly also, quite frankly, we recognize that while there is some research being done out there in scholarly settings and the like, there was a real need for healthcare-specific research to be taking a look at what is the impact of these various leadership development approaches on actual health system outcomes. So what's in it for NCHL to be supporting this activity, and this is not a commercial activity for us. We do a lot of outreach. We encourage people to fill out the survey. There's no cost to complete the survey. We generate these scorecards and we get them out to everybody who participated. There's no cost associated with that. Really, the only way that we recoup anything off of these efforts is if people come to our annual meeting because they learned about us through the BOLD program. We get a little bit of support through that, but this is principally mission work for us. So you can see a representation of the scorecard here. You can see the 12 dimensions. I'm going to talk about each of these in a little bit more depth, so I won't do that now. The final thing I want to mention before diving into the dimensions themselves is we've got a couple of research projects that our graduate students, we work a lot with Rush University, which is a health systems university here in Chicago. We were able to, for the first time, start to take a look at the relationship between some of these dimensions and other publicly available data, including hospital operating margin. This is available through CMS. You can see there's some robust correlations between a number of the dimensions. I should throw in the caveat, these are small samples. This is like 120, I think, roughly, who had participated in the survey process at this point. So we're going to need to be doing more of this research, but in any case, early indicators are pretty favorable. You can see down on the second one, there was a study just of academic medical centers, and this is the relationship between some of these practices and HCAP scores. The top box, the 9-10, if you're familiar with how HCAP gets calculated into value-based purchasing. The quick thing I'll say before we leave this slide, which was an interesting one for us, was the administrative fellowships, postgraduate administrative fellowships. We were not actually expecting this one to have a significant association with these outcomes. We had it on the survey more because of the importance to the field than a research base suggesting that these relate to organizational outcomes. So an interesting finding here for anyone who either runs these fellowships or is interested in starting them. So with that, the next slide you can see an overlay of the 12 dimensions. What I'm going to do now is spend just a minute or two on each of the dimensions. As I'm doing that, again, if you have questions that come up, if you want to send them into the chat, I'm happy to take them as they come in, or we can take them towards the end of the webinar. So just really quickly, you see in parentheses the percentages. What that gives you is the weighting for each dimension in terms of the total score. I again want to underscore, there's the bold program and the recognition that's associated with this, but truly at the end of the day, what we're hoping is that health systems are able to use the survey to reflect on where they may already be strong and areas where it might be helpful for them to strengthen what they're doing in the area of leadership development. So with that, our first dimension, and the one that has the strongest weighting to it, is one that we refer to as strategically aligning leadership development. What I'm going to show you on this slide and on subsequent slides, and I want to thank Casey for helping to put this together. I mentioned the white papers on the NCHL website. We also have a YouTube channel where we upload a number of our presentations every year from our annual conference. And so what we've done here is we've highlighted a few that speak specifically to these types of dimensions. So if you want a little bit of a deeper dive on any of these, you can take a look at some of the high performers from prior years. So strategically aligning leadership development really deals with the extent to which leadership programs are hardwired into strategy. You can see a diagram there from the NCHL archives in terms of how the ideal flow ought to look. Some of you on the call may look at this and say, well, of course, why wouldn't you tie leadership development to strategy? But we can tell you from our experience, frequently we see leadership development coming from more of a grassroots level, and there can still be some real value in training and education at all levels, but if you don't have the alignment, you don't have the impact, is the quick answer there. So questions on the survey that relate to this one, it's the extent to which senior leaders provide governance and oversight for the leadership programs. There's some questions on that. There's also some questions on the extent to which senior leadership actually personally participates in the program. Not just kicking it off in the first 5 minutes to say, welcome to the leadership program, but actually up to and including leading some of the sessions, serving as mentors on applied learning projects, and the like. And so a couple of real forward-thinking organizations, Penn Medicine is one of them, Northwell Health is another. We've got videos from both available on that YouTube webpage, which is also, we've got a link for you in that later in the webinar. So our next dimension then is attracting and selecting leaders. Speaking from the evidence base, there is no stronger evidence base than around the selection process, and that's to say if you've got a nice, robust selection process as well as a robust attraction process, this gives you your greatest return right out of the gate in terms of investments made. What KC has put up here for us is some examples of the types of questions that are associated with the selection process in particular. What you don't see in here is a health system also gets credit in terms of the approaches it takes to, for example, if it's got a best organizations for employee of choice types of designations. There is research to support these are meaningful to prospective employees. Magnet is another one of them. Quality awards are others. It's achieving those awards, but then using them strategically to build that base of people who are applying. So what you see here in this box, not all selection processes are the same in terms of their effectiveness in identifying highly talented individuals. So there are questions on here. They're designed to be descriptive rather than evaluative, but what's behind the scenes is organizations get more credit if they're using approaches that have greater validity to them. The quick thing I will say about validity is the closer you can get to actual job experience as an input into the selection process, the more valid you tend to have. So shadowing, simulations, assessment centers, these tend to be particularly robust approaches. The ones that tend to be much less robust is the less systematic, the kind of leaving it up to the individual manager, not taking a behavioral-based approach, but just more of kind of an informal approach. A lot of research has suggested those just aren't as effective. So the quick video there, Freighted Health's done a lot of good work in this area, so that would be a great video to check out for that. Next up, we have the Preparing New Leaders for Success. So this one really deals with once you have somebody attracted into the organization, how is the organization working with them to ensure they get off to a strong start? And at one end of the continuum, we have somebody showing up and having to figure a lot of things out for themselves. This might be up to and including having a different perspective on what the job's all about than they originally had when they first applied. And the more forward-thinking organizations will have a formal system in place, a 30, 60, 90-day check-in, for example, to ensure that people are getting off to a strong start, and if there are problems, that they're addressed early. This is also something, there's some real good research to suggest that this can reduce turnover and can improve retention, not only in leadership positions, but just generally. All right, so next up we have the identifying and developing of high potentials. And this is essentially what an organization is doing to make sure they're being mindful of people who are performing especially well in their current jobs and who might have the interest as well as the ambition to be able to move into more senior level roles. And so, you know, a couple of quick data points on this one, or a couple of quick research points. It's typically both more efficient from a payroll perspective, as well as more effective in terms of a person's likelihood of success in a new role if a health system is able to pull somebody up from a lower level position versus going out to the labor market to bring somebody in from the outside. And those are a couple of the reasons the identification and development of high potentials are particularly important and particularly valuable. So there's a video there too as well for folks who are interested in learning a little bit more about that. Next up, we have providing developmental experiences. I will say from the look across health systems, this is one that a lot of organizations are really struggling with. And this really deals with pulling people out of a job and giving them opportunities to learn by doing, either through a rotation process, temporary assignment, or other types of formal action learning programs. There are some more action learning types of activities going on, Then there are the rotation piece. The rotation piece, which is much more common in other industries, is still more the exception than the rule, even in the organizations who are going after a bold designation. This is just something I think in healthcare we get very nervous about moving people around if they're doing well in a job. Although again, here the evidence suggests this is the best way to prepare people for more senior level roles. So again, these are just two questions of a number of them, but the questions on the survey related to development experiences will deal with stretch assignments, and they'll deal with rotation and some of these other types of things. Next up, we have providing performance feedback. So if you think about work-based learning and actually having the opportunity to do some of these types of jobs is particularly important to preparing for positions of greater responsibility. The flip side of that coin is ensuring people are maximizing the benefit of those stretch assignments and those rotations through high quality feedback. And so one of the examples off of the survey has to do with development-based 360-degree feedback. These are feedback sessions that aren't directly tied to performance appraisal. Some of the research on this, if you tie a 360 to a performance appraisal, what you tend to get are higher scores, because people know, okay, this is going to impact a person's merit score or the like, and so they're much more reticent about providing open and candid feedback. If these happen off cycle, and if they don't directly tie back in a meaningful fashion to the performance review, you tend to get more honest feedback and more actionable feedback because you have it being more candid. So this is one example. 360 is one approach. There are many other approaches as well, but this is one that's well traveled. So it's the one that we set up here on the webinar program. So the next dimension then, planning for continuity and future needs. Some of you may know this one better by the term succession planning. We like continuity and future needs a little bit better because it speaks more to the heart of what an organization is truly trying to accomplish through the succession planning process. And it's not just a matter of a position that gets vacated and needs to be filled. We call that type of a transaction more replacement planning. There too, planning ahead can be very helpful, but the broader look is really when you talk about continuity and future needs, this incorporates aspects like workforce planning, recognizing that the organization of the future is going to look a little different than the organization today. So not only the individual positions around today, but the capabilities that the organization is going to need from a leadership capacity. So some of the kinds of things that an organization might do that they would be recognized for in the survey: the 9-box, the formal assessment, that tracking process, cooperative and collaborative decision-making around the talent review sessions themselves. So here too, obviously, an organization that's doing talent review sessions is going to be scoring more favorably on this one than an organization that's not. If you're not familiar with talent review sessions, and a lot of health systems are not, there's a white paper on the website, case studies and best practices in health leadership management and succession planning, that goes into this topic in some more depth. All right, so next up we have developing clinical leadership. And this is one, again, if you think about best organizations for versus best organizations at, clinicians in particular have their own unique needs for leadership roles. You know, somebody who has a background like an MBA or an MHA will have a lot of exposure to some concepts around things, even as simple as like organizational behavior, as well as skills around managing meetings, negotiating, problem solving, leading through influence, these types of things. So we have questions on the survey associated with that. Here's one of the ones that's a little bit more kind of higher level, which is the extent to which an organization has built in some of this to CME and CNE types of credits. That's a fairly high level of recognition about the importance of this skill development as it's associated with these specific professions. So I apologize, I forgot to mention, but just really quickly, there is also a white paper, a really nice one on some of the organizations that are doing some pretty interesting work in position leadership development, have developed some fairly sophisticated programs. So we encourage you to check that one out. That one's also available on our website. Next up, we have the Developing for Diversity and Inclusion. This is another one. The evidence base out there is not as strong as we would like it to be, but this is one we have heard consistently is very important from a mission perspective to the health systems. So from a mission perspective, we wanted it as a part of the survey, but also we wanted to be able to use the data to start to do some of this research that's so desperately needed. And a lot of health systems are experiencing a real challenge in helping the senior leadership complements be more representative of the constituent communities that we all serve. So you can see one of the survey items here is related to outcomes more than process, and that is an organization will be viewed as a more favorable climate for women if they have more mentors in leadership roles. Now, there is some research to support this. If I look up in an organization and if I see people who are more demographically like myself, I'm more likely to feel like I've got opportunity in that organization. With questions like this, an organization gets credit for diversity, but there's also, in terms of the algorithms themselves, some safeguards against, you know, you get up to, let's say, 40%, 40 to 50% women, it's diminishing returns after that point. And if you have a C-suite that is 100% women, you start to then tilt the other way. This is the same with other demographic groups. The survey algorithms favor diversity over homogeneity, even if the homogeneity is from underrepresented groups. All right, so next up, we've got the Incorporation of Administrative Fellowships. And this one, circling back to the research that I flashed at the beginning of this webinar, this one really surprised us in that it did seem to have a robust association with organizational outcomes that we really weren't expecting, and we're trying to get our arms around now. Is this a capacity kind of a thing where if you've got more organizational slack that we're picking up some of that, or is it that you have a more professionally and educationally focused senior leadership team? But in any case, you know, given this relationship, we are more strongly saying, hey, postgraduate administrative fellowships are something worth taking a look at if you don't have these within your organization. We do have within NCHL a membership program around administrative fellowships, and the program is designed to make the process simpler and more efficient for everyone involved. There's a centralized application system that streamlines a lot of the process. There is a directory that we have that's made available nationally to the graduate programs so that they can identify these sites. I mention all of this because in addition, and if you don't have a fellowship site, you might not know this, there are far more graduate students in healthcare management programs who are interested in fellowship opportunities than there are fellowship opportunities to host them. There's definitely a supply-demand imbalance, so it can be a great way to attract early career talent to your organization. And NCAF has and is working on a number of resources to help new organizations get these up and running. There too, Casey or Lindsay would be very happy to provide you with more information. So you have a couple of questions here. The running of a fellowship, you get credit just for doing that. If you've got some robustness to the program itself, that weighs in your favor. And your ability to retain fellows post-graduation, you also receive some credit for that on the survey. So this will bring us to our second to last dimension. This one is on monitoring and achieving results. And this is the extent to which a health system is tracking the talent management, leadership development activities that they're doing, number one, and then number two, the extent to which that tracking process is meaningfully feeding back into a senior level discussion and process around leadership development. So we had a really nice video from Centera Healthcare a few years ago that they went into some depth in terms of the outcomes and results in particular that they monitor. It's towards the back end of their video, but that's a great one to take a look at in terms of some examples of the kinds of things that can be meaningfully monitored. We've mentioned a couple of them throughout the webinar today, but retention is an important one. The ability to attract talent is an important one. These are the kinds of things as we start to be able to monetize what these mean for the organization. I think they start to cast leadership development in the right light, which is it's an investment and it can yield some significant returns in terms of efficiency and other outcomes. So this is an example, sorry to jump ahead too quick. This is an example of one of the questions. It's for what levels your organization tracks bench strength. Bench strength, we have a definition around in terms of these are individuals who are ready for moving into new positions. There are applications that can provide this type of analytic work. Probably some of your organizations use them already, so I won't go into depth about that, but just another example of the kinds of things that can be useful for monitoring. So I'm going to end with the final, this is a new dimension that showed up in 2016. It was on our radar in 2014, but the data or the evidence base just wasn't quite there yet. You can see some of the research that's come out in the last several years in support of coaching for leadership development. This is one, you know, if you think about what coaching can do, and you think about research on things like even student-teacher ratio, you don't get a better student-teacher ratio than a one-on-one. So that's kind of a piece of it. Coaches tend to work with individuals around the challenges they're facing in the workplace. So it's a very useful adjunct to work-based learning. And you can see there, I won't jump through each of these, but there's some nice meta-analyses, which are quantitatively aggregated studies across the impact. These are pretty significant jumps in terms of performance as well as other outcomes like well-being that have been attributed to coaching engagements of various kinds. So we've added some questions in 16. We added a new dimension, and the dimension really deals with the extent to which the organization or organizations are using coaching and making it available broadly to folks within the organization. One final quick thing I'll mention about this, and actually let's go ahead to the next slide to tee this up. Just so you know, and in full disclosure, not every question on the BOLD survey maps back up to one of the dimensions, and that's purposeful and intentional. There are emerging topics every couple of years that look important, but the evidence base isn't quite there yet. And what we want to start doing is collecting data on behalf of the field, so we know, how this is evolving over time. But then also sometimes we can make contributions to those data collection processes ourselves. The other thing that we do with these data is we can, from time to time, report out what percentage of folks responding to the survey are engaged in some of these emerging areas. We get questions about, is this a thing in the field, or is this just something we've read about from one health system? So you can see the 5 there. I'm not going to read these to you, don't worry. But some of the areas that are starting to look particularly important related to leadership development and capacity building, we do have something around innovation and risk-taking. This is kind of starting to get universally recognized. It's a strength for health systems from a reliability perspective, but it's also a limitation in terms of thinking outside the box and trying new things. And so it's how do we get our heads around or our arms around allowing people to do the kinds of innovations that are going to be important in the future. Some of the other areas, leadership assemblies is a specific example of bringing together the broad population of staff to have a shared learning experience or a shared communication. It's a great way to evolve culture because it gets everybody onto the same page, or at least hearing the same message at the same time. We're seeing a number of organizations picking this up. What we don't have quite yet is outcome information about how this is impacting outside of those organizations. Inter-organization development. One of the areas we're seeing a lot more interesting experimentation is in health systems partnering, for example, with community providers, other nonprofits in the communities that they serve. A lot of health systems have far more resources in terms of leadership development, and to the extent that they're able to leverage them to start to build these inter-organizational networks, these are the kinds of things that we believe are going to start to become more important in terms of addressing some of these population health challenges. Wellness, mental health, that probably speaks for itself, but across all of our health systems, particularly among the clinicians, increasing challenge balancing the expectations that they're being given, as well as a sense sometimes of powerlessness in terms of the change processes. And so it's engaging folks in new ways to empower them, to ensure that their voices are heard, but then also make sure that they're taking care of themselves so that they're in the best position to be taking care of patients. And then the last one is the big data and predictive modeling. A lot of interesting experiments starting to get run on not just what the workforce today looks like, but trying to look around the corner and see, you know, what are the pain points, what are the areas of need that we might be able to forecast and start to work on the sooner side. There's also a lot of work, there's particularly a lot of work going on this outside of healthcare. But we are starting to see some inroads. I was actually just on a call earlier today with an organization called Burning Glass that has some artificial intelligence work that does web crawling to look at something like 45,000 job sites and is able to monitor dynamics around changing needs around competencies and talent and the like. So these are some of the kinds of things that just simply haven't been possible before. But given advancements in deep learning, as well as the capacity to manage big data, there's some emerging areas that, while there's not good research yet, they do seem to hold some real promise for healthcare and talent challenges going forward. So I think I did okay blasting through here. I want to thank everybody for hanging on with us through that long didactic. I'd like to now ask if there are any questions, anything at all that we might be able to speak to. I did throw a few questions out myself. Please don't feel any obligation to speak to them, but we really do want to make sure that you got what you were hoping for out of this webinar, as well as any questions that you might have, or anything else you would like to know some more about. I'm going to pause there for a minute and let folks type, or if you want to take yourself off of mute and you want to pitch a question out to us, that's okay too, Casey is telling me. All right, well, Casey is telling me she's not seeing any typing yet. So I'm going to go ahead and say my last couple of quick things. But I want to do that with a recognition. We still have some time. If you've got a question and you want to ping it in there, I will stop what I'm saying. I'm happy to answer it. But while we're doing that, if we could quick circulate over to, I just want to again congratulate our bold award recipients and organizations of distinction. I also want to share one other tip for you if you are interested in going up to the bold in particular, but then also just generally having meaningful feedback from your survey. We've had a couple of experiences where folks completed the survey and they either weren't aware of some stuff going on in their health system, or they skipped over a few questions that were relevant to one of the algorithms. If you skip over questions on the survey, it doesn't help you, and it can hurt you in terms of how you look on a particular dimension That's not something we have any way of quality controlling over. We don't know what you do and what you don't do. What CASIA has done for the organizations that look like they may be receiving a bold designation is she will ask them to validate and verify what we sent them. But again, that's on the organizations we work with. There's nothing we can, there's no way we can know whether you're missing something. So that's my suggestion. I do have a question. I have some thank yous. You're most welcome. Thank you for joining us. Ben Quintana, where can I find the examples of how other health systems have aligned leadership development to organizational strategy? The two videos that CASIA had on the slides are great places to start. I would ask you to take a look at those, and the bibliography page, which we're going to get to in just a couple of slides, will have the URL for the YouTube channel. But if you go to the YouTube channel and you type in NCHLeadership, that's NCHL Leadership, but there's just the one L. You'll pull up every video that we've ever posted. And then if you do a search actually on Penn Medicine and on Northwell, that's a quick way to pull them up. Or if you browse through them, you'll see the two pictures that we flashed there. That's a great place to get started. If you still have questions after taking a look at those, feel free to reach out to CASIA. Just noticed that Carolinas Estate is in Charlotte, Virginia.
Yeah, it is. We'll fix that.
We are good. Thank you so much. You know, we like to recognize our bold winners, and we were getting the slides ready this morning, and we said, oh, gee, we need to put together a slide to recognize them. So it was our mistake in terms of just being a little too quick and getting our props out. But yes, Carolinas is in North Carolina. That's the name. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. We'll make sure that that's corrected in what we send out. Is there any other questions? Or did that?
No other questions.
No other questions. Okay. Well, again, congratulations to our bold award winners. This is a big deal in the sense that if for those of you who completed the survey, you know it's no small task. So the folks who fill out the survey tend to already be doing a fair amount of good work in this area anyway. We encourage everyone to fill it out just to get a baseline, but honestly, most of the people that fill it out are pretty good, are in pretty good shape. So one other quick thing, I don't know if anyone on the call might be joining us in Chicago for the ACHE Congress, but I'm going to be co-presenting a workshop along with my colleague Joan Evans, who's the Executive Vice President of Innovation and Transformation from one of our awardees, Cone Health. We're going to be doing that on Tuesday, March the 28th. And you can see 4 of the dimensions that are highlighted there. We're going to be doing a deep dive on those 4 specific dimensions. It's a 3-hour session, so we'll spend a good solid half hour to 45 minutes on each. Joan's going to tell this wonderful cone story, as well as I'll be sharing some of the examples from some of our programs as well. We'll be doing more on selecting leaders, monitoring, achieving results, and coaching for leadership development. So again, if you're coming to Congress, do please consider signing up for that specific workshop. All right, I guess with that, let me do a quick thank you. All right. And let me then, CASIA's contact information is available, but if you're a part of the website, I think, or the webinar, you already have it, which is great. If you could quick circle over to the bibliography, there you can see at the top of the YouTube channel, /users/NCHLeadership. What you have down there in the finer print is every publication that we cited throughout the webinar today.
We had a question of when will we be sending out this PowerPoint? This, I think we're going to do 2 things. We're going to send it out to all the attendees. We're also going to be putting it up on our website as well, just for other materials. So Paul, you will be getting that through email, as will everyone else on the webinar right now. and we will make sure it's available to anyone else that would like it. So,
Did you say when?
I'm happy to send it out today. So,
Okay.
Great.
You
Thank
want
you.
to put Carolina's back in the right spot, you know?
yeah, I'll fix that first. Exactly.
All right, well, thank you again for your interest in the BOLD program, your interest in NCHL, and your interest in developing the next generation of healthcare leaders. We salute your work. We know it often happens without a lot of accolade. We're there with you. So I hope everyone has a terrific afternoon.